What does it feel like to be told you don't belong right in the place you've rightfully earned? Picture a young black passenger, barely 20 years old, quietly settling into her first-class seat. Moments later, a flight attendant leans in and says she must move because a wealthy white woman wants that spot. In that instant, the world stops. The humiliation burns, the whispers around her grow louder, and a choice rises in front of her: accept silence or stand for dignity. This wasn't just about a chair on a plane. It was about something far greater: the right to exist with respect, without apology, without compromise. And what no one on that flight knew was that the teenager they tried to dismiss carried a truth powerful enough to turn an entire industry upside down. If it were you, sitting in that seat, eyes upon you, would you stay quiet? Would you fight? Or would you reveal who you truly are? Stay with us, because what unfolded next is a story of courage, justice, and a twist no one saw coming. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the lessons this journey holds. The flight from New York to San Francisco had boarded on schedule. A crisp autumn morning when the air outside still carried the bite of early cold. Inside the cabin, however, the warmth of first class hummed with quiet comfort. Soft leather seats, overhead lights dimmed to a golden glow, the muted clink of glasses being set on linen-covered trays. Selena Moore slipped into seat 2A, near the window, her backpack carefully stowed overhead. She wore jeans, a gray hoodie, and her mother's gold necklace. To most of the other passengers, she looked like any college student on her way to California. No one would have guessed that beneath her casual appearance, she was the majority shareholder of Horizon Airways, the very airline they were flying on. Selena liked it that way. Anonymity was freedom. She could observe, think, and remember without anyone fussing over her age or her title. But this morning would not pass quietly. Just minutes after she settled in, a shadow fell across her. A voice, crisp and edged, broke the calm. "Excuse me, miss," the flight attendant said, her name badge flashing under the cabin light. "Brenda Collins, this seat isn't yours. I'll need you to move." Selena looked up, calm but puzzled. "I'm sorry. My boarding pass says 2A. Brenda forced a practiced smile, the kind that masked irritation. "Yes, I see that. But we have a special situation. A passenger with a medical need requires this seat. If you'll gather your things, I'll help you find another place." Selena's eyes followed Brenda's subtle glance across the aisle. Sitting just 2 rows back was Victoria Langford, well-dressed, diamonds on her wrist, lips painted a bold crimson. She wasn't coughing, limping, or showing any sign of medical distress. Instead, she sipped champagne as though she owned the sky. Selena kept her voice low. "I don't understand. Why me?" Brenda's smile thinned. "Well, let's not make this difficult. First class is for certain passengers. Ms. Langford is a valued client, and she specifically asked for this seat." The words hit harder than the chilly air outside. Certain passengers. The implication was clear. A man in the next row, older, balding, leaned slightly forward, curiosity written all over his face. A young woman 2 seats down pretended to check her phone, but kept glancing at the scene. The tension was spreading, as it always did when power was being tested. Selena's pulse quickened, but her expression remained composed. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "Never let them see you shaken, even when they want you to break." "I'm fine here," she said gently. "I paid for this seat, and I'll stay in it." Brenda's veneer cracked. Her voice sharpened. No longer private, but pitched just loud enough for others to hear. "Young lady, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. First class isn't about money alone. We prioritize experience, loyalty, and profile. I'm sure you'd be more comfortable in economy." The words profile and comfortable and economy stung like open insults. A murmur rippled through the cabin. Selina inhaled slowly. Her instinct screamed at her to pull out her phone, to show proof, to end this with a flourish of authority. But she paused. She thought of her parents. Her father turned away from promotions 11 times. Her mother humiliated by microaggressions until she left the airline industry altogether. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about a system. "Ms. Collins," Selina said, her tone even. "I am in the correct seat. I won't move." Victoria Langford finally joined the moment. Her voice a cool drizzle. "Really, Brenda, do we need to argue with this child? Look at her. Does she look like she belongs here? Handle it, please." That single word, child, ignited something in Selina's chest. She felt the old anger surge, but she channeled it inward, pressing her palms against her knees until they steadied. Around them, phones appeared. Passengers were recording, sensing the drama blooming before takeoff. One man whispered, "This is going viral." Brenda crossed her arms, frustrated. "Miss, if you refuse to comply, I'll have to call the captain. You could be removed from the flight altogether." Selina's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. Not mocking, not defiant, just steady. She reached slowly into her backpack and pulled out a slim leather wallet. From it, she removed a sleek black card embossed with gold letters. Horizon Airways majority shareholder, Selina Moore. The cabin seemed to freeze. Even the hum of the air system felt quieter. Selina placed the card gently on the tray table, her fingers tapping it once, deliberately. Her gaze met Brenda's squarely. "You're asking me to move from a seat in an airline I own." A gasp broke from someone 2 rows behind. The man with the balding head sat straighter, whispering to his seatmate. Victoria Langford's champagne glass trembled slightly before she set it down with a sharp click. Brenda's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Selina leaned back, folding her arms, voice calm but resolute. "Now, would you like to continue this conversation, or should I call my board of directors?" The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, charged, the kind of silence that precedes a storm. Cameras recorded every flicker of expression, and though Brenda tried to muster her professional tone again, it was too late. The moment had already left its mark. Selina didn't need to raise her voice. The truth, revealed quietly, was louder than any outburst, and the flight hadn't even left the ground. The aircraft doors had not yet closed, but the atmosphere in first class had already transformed. What had begun as routine boarding had turned into a spectacle. Every pair of eyes fixed on Selina Moore. The black shareholder card on her tray table glinted softly under the cabin light, undeniable and solid. Brenda Collins stood frozen. Her professional smile collapsed into an awkward grimace. Her training had never covered a situation like this. A teenager barely old enough to drink, dressed like a student on a budget flight, claiming ownership of Horizon Airways. And yet the card, the weight of it, and the quiet confidence in Selina's tone made it hard to dismiss. Passengers whispered across the aisle. Recording was subtle, tilted phones. The hum of speculation grew louder. She owns the airline. Did she say majority shareholder? No way. Victoria Langford, unsettled but not defeated, leaned forward in her seat. Her diamond bracelet caught the light as she adjusted her posture, reclaiming her practiced poise. "Darling," she said, voice dripping with condescension, "anyone can print a fancy card. That doesn't make you someone important." Selina turned her head slowly toward her, her expression unreadable. She let Victoria's words linger in the air before speaking. "You're right," she said evenly. Cards can be printed, but flight manifests, shareholder records, and legal filings, those can't. The cabin felt quieter, passengers waiting for the next move. Selena's composure seemed almost theatrical, yet there was no performance. Her calm was deliberate, an inheritance of dignity passed down through generations who had endured worse slights with grace and grit. Brenda fumbled for authority. Ms. Langford is a valued client. She contributes generously to the airline's loyalty program. She's flown with us for over 20 years. Selena's gaze softened, but her words carried weight. And in those 20 years, how many times have passengers of color been told they don't belong in this cabin? How many times has your loyalty program protected dignity instead of champagne privileges? It wasn't a raised voice that silenced the room. It was the sharpness of truth. A young man in business attire, sitting 2 rows back, raised his phone higher, capturing it all. A woman whispered, "This will be online before we land." Victoria flushed but pressed forward. "Look, child, I don't know what stunt you're trying to pull, but the way this airline is run has nothing to do with you." Selena allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. She reached for her phone, tapped once, and turned the screen toward Victoria and Brenda. On it was a live web page, Horizon Airways Shareholder Registry. At the very top, under Majority Stakeholder, Selena J. Moore, 52% ownership. Gas filled the cabin, audible this time. Someone muttered, "She wasn't lying." Selena slid the phone back into her hoodie pocket, her voice calm but tinged with something deeper now. "This airline has everything to do with me, and how you treat passengers has everything to do with all of us." Brenda stepped back, her confidence unraveling. I didn't realize." "You didn't ask," Selena replied softly. "You looked, and you assumed." The truth landed like a weight. For Brenda, who had worked 2 decades serving first-class cabins, the realization stung in a way her training manuals never warned about. Victoria, unwilling to yield, waved a manicured hand. "This is ridiculous. You're barely out of high school. Do you expect us to believe you control one of the nation's largest airlines? Nonsense?" Selena didn't respond immediately. She let Victoria's dismissal sit in the air, allowed the passengers to taste the arrogance in her tone. Then, with steady breath, she leaned forward just slightly. Sometimes the people you underestimate the most are the ones holding the strings you can't see. The tension hung like a storm cloud, thick and electric. At that moment, the captain's voice came over the intercom, warm but formal. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Horizon Airways Flight 2117 to San Francisco. Please take your seats as we prepare for departure." Passengers shifted, buckling belts, but their focus didn't waver from the exchange in row 2. Selena tucked the shareholder card back into her wallet, her movements unhurried. She could have pressed harder, demanded apologies, called security to escort Victoria out. But power wasn't always about flexing in the moment. Power was knowing when to let silence do the speaking. As Brenda retreated down the aisle, cheeks burning, Victoria sat stiff, her jaw tight, her pride smarting. She had expected compliance, submission, and maybe even gratitude for her supposed generosity. Instead, she had been exposed as entitled and small-minded in front of a captive audience. Selena turned to the window, the city skyline shrinking beneath her as the plane taxied. Her reflection in the glass showed a calm face, but inside, her thoughts churned. She remembered her mother's tears after being escorted off a flight years ago for safety concerns that were little more than coded prejudice. She remembered her father's stories of being the only black man in his management training class. His promotions always stalled, his ideas stolen. Her ownership of Horizon Airways was not just a business move. It was a reclamation, a way of rewriting a narrative that had long been written against families like hers. But as the plane lifted into the gray morning sky, she knew this small confrontation was only the beginning. She had revealed herself too soon, forced by arrogance into the light. And now, those who felt threatened by her power would not sit quietly. Selina inhaled, exhaled, and pressed her palms flat against her knees. Calm was her weapon. Patience was her shield. Somewhere behind her, she could still hear Victoria whispering to another passenger, voice low but venomous. "She'll regret this. Girls like her don't stay on top." Selina closed her eyes. The words sharp but not surprising. She had heard them all her life, in classrooms, boardrooms, even whispered within her own extended family. But she also knew what those voices never seemed to grasp. She wasn't climbing into their world. She was building her own, and Horizon Airways, whether they liked it or not, was hers to shape. The plane leveled at cruising altitude. The cabin lights dimmed, and meal service began. Brenda moved stiffly down the aisle, avoiding Selina's row, her voice unusually flat as she offered champagne and warm towels. Passengers accepted, but kept glancing at Selina, curiosity and quiet admiration flickering in their eyes. Selina reached into her backpack and pulled out a slim notebook. She opened it to a fresh page and wrote just one line in neat block letters. "Every battle begins small." She underlined it once, firmly, before setting the notebook aside. She didn't know yet how quickly those battles would escalate, or how fierce the storm waiting on the ground would become. But she sensed it. And in her calm, in her steady silence, she prepared herself. Because this fight was never just about a seat in first class. It was about rewriting the rules of the sky itself. By the time Horizon Airways Flight 217 touched down in San Francisco, the story had already slipped beyond the cabin walls. Passengers had uploaded short clips of the confrontation before takeoff. Selina holding up her phone with the shareholder registry. Victoria's incredulous expression. Brenda's awkward retreat. The internet had done the rest, spinning the moment into a viral storm before the wheels even kissed the runway. Selina noticed the shift the moment she powered on her phone. Notifications flooded in like a torrent missed calls from Marcus Hill. Dozens of text messages from Danielle Price. News alerts pinging one after another. Hashtags had erupted. Why, or seat for Selina. Or owns the airline. Not moving. She tightened her grip on the phone, eyes flickering across headlines. Black teen reveals she owns Horizon Airways. Flight attendant tells teen to move. She turns out to be the boss. David versus Goliath at 35,000 feet. Her chest felt both heavy and strangely light. Heavy because she hadn't planned to reveal herself so soon. Not like this. Light because maybe, just maybe, the humiliation her parents once endured at the hands of airlines would never be repeated without consequence again. Passengers around her whispered, some sneaking glances at her as they unbuckled seatbelts. Victoria Langford rose stiffly, her face pale with fury, and brushed past without a word. Selina let her go, not because she wasn't tempted to say more, but because battles weren't always won in crowded aisles. Marcus was waiting just beyond security when she emerged. His tall frame and salt and pepper hair gave him a gravitas that contrasted sharply with Selina's youthful presence. He didn't smile. Instead, he placed a firm hand on her shoulder and said in a low voice, "It's begun." Selina nodded, exhaustion tugging at her. "I didn't mean for it to go public so soon." "You didn't need to mean it," Marcus replied. "The system always exposes itself when challenged. You held your ground. Now we brace for the counterstrike." Outside, cameras were already gathering. A few passengers pointed her out to reporters, and the first flashes burst across the curbside pickup lane. Selina felt her pulse quicken, but walked forward steadily, Marcus at her side. Danielle Price appeared moments later, weaving through the press with determined strides. She was only in her late 20s, but carried herself with the authority of someone twice her age. "Selina, we need to get you out of here before they twist this." "They already are," Selina murmured, glancing at a headline on a reporter's tablet. "Spoiled teen claims airline ownership in first-class tantrum." Danielle's eyes flashed. "Then we'll untwist it. But first, let's get to the office. We'll debrief there, in the black SUV waiting at the curb." Selina finally allowed herself to exhale. The city blurred past, skyscrapers gleaming under the midday sun. Marcus and Danielle exchanged quick updates, shareholder reactions, legal implications, early signs of pushback from Horizon's upper management. Edward Kane's name surfaced quickly. "He's already in damage control," Marcus said grimly. "Edward called an emergency meeting with the board this morning. He'll spin this as recklessness. Say you embarrass the company and jeopardize brand stability." Selina stared out the window, her reflection shadowed against the glass. "And he'll use my age to his advantage." Danielle turned toward her, voice sharp but supportive. "Let him. Every time they underestimate you, you gain ground. What matters is what we do next." Selina opened her notebook, the same one from the flight, and flipped to the page with her single line, "Every battle begins small." She tapped the words lightly with her pen. "Then we move to the next battle." By the time they reached Marcus's downtown office, the viral clips had been viewed millions of times. Some commentators praised Selina as a symbol of resilience, while others dismissed her as a performative heiress. Danielle pulled up trending tweets, highlighting the polarization. "This is bigger than one confrontation," she said. "It's becoming a cultural flashpoint." Selina sank into a leather chair, running her fingers over the notebook's edges. "Good. If it shines a light on how people are treated in the air, then maybe the ground will finally shake." The ground did shake, faster than even Marcus expected. Horizon's board issued a press statement within hours. Carefully worded, "We are aware of the situation involving Ms. Selina Moore and will be reviewing conduct on board Flight 217. The language was neutral, but the implication was clear. Selina was under scrutiny, not protected. Edward Kane appeared on a financial news broadcast that evening, with his silver hair perfectly combed and his voice dripping with practiced authority. He framed the incident as a misunderstanding amplified by social media. He emphasized the importance of experienced leadership in times of turbulence and assured investors that Horizon would remain a stable, reliable company despite distractions. Selina watched from Marcus's office, jaw tightening. She could see the strategy forming: minimize her authority, question her maturity, paint her as a liability. "They'll come harder," Marcus warned. "This is only their opening move." Danielle crossed her arms. "Then we need ours. We can't let the story fade into just another viral headline." Selina leaned forward, her voice low but steady. "Then we tell the whole truth. Not just what happened on that flight, but what's been happening for decades. The decision set the tone for what came next." Selina authorized Danielle to prepare legal briefs highlighting past discrimination complaints against Horizon, many of which had been buried under confidentiality agreements. Marcus began reaching out to employees who had long whispered about systemic bias but never dared speak publicly. That night, while the city lights shimmered below her hotel window, Selina wrote in her notebook again. This time, the words flowed heavier. "They see me as a child with money. They don't see the generations behind me, the ones denied, dismissed, delayed. I carry them all." She closed the book gently, pressing her hand against the cover as though holding her ancestors in place. The next morning brought another twist. A video surfaced from a former flight attendant, Graney, recorded years ago, detailing how staff were instructed to protect the premium experience by finding reasons to move certain passengers from first class. The attendant's voice shook as she described how the code words comfort adjustment and cabin balance were used to disguise racial targeting. The clip exploded across social platforms, reinforcing Selena's claims before she had even spoken publicly. Danielle looked up from her phone, eyes alight with urgency. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about an entire system, and people are ready to listen. Selena nodded slowly. She felt the weight of the moment pressing on her shoulders, but also the strange lightness of clarity. This was never just her fight. It was bigger, wider, deeper. When Marcus entered the room, carrying fresh printouts of legal documents, Selena met his eyes with calm determination. Then we don't wait for them to define the battlefield. We define it ourselves. And as the day unfolded with reporters gathering outside, employees whispering in hallways, and Edward Kane plotting his next counter move, Selena understood something profound. The flight had been only the spark. The real fire was just beginning to burn. The Horizon Airways headquarters in Manhattan towered over the streets like a fortress of glass and steel. For years, it had symbolized stability, an institution built on the reputations of men like Edward Kane. But now, as Selena stepped through its revolving doors with Marcus and Danielle at her side, the building seemed to hum with unease. Employees glanced up from their desks as whispers passed through the lobby. The girl from the flight, the video, the owner. Selena kept her chin steady, though her heart pulsed quickly. She had been in corporate boardrooms before, through internships, through her early tech ventures. But this was different. This wasn't just a pitch meeting. This was her company, her battle, and her right. Security ushered them upstairs. The boardroom itself was a study in powered dark wood paneling, leather chairs, a long table stretching toward floor-to-ceiling windows that revealed the city skyline. At the far end sat Edward Kane, immaculate as always, his silver hair gleaming under the recessed lighting. "Ms. Moore," he said, his tone oiled with politeness. "I'm glad you accepted our invitation. We have much to discuss." Invitation was a generous word. The board had summoned her less than 24 hours after Flight 2117's viral explosion, and the meeting agenda had arrived through curt legal phrasing, mandatory attendance requested for clarification of shareholder rights. Selena took her seat near the center of the table, Marcus and Danielle flanking her like sentinels. Edward scanned the room, eyes flicking toward the other directors. Most were older men, a few women, all wearing expressions of wary calculation. "We've all seen the footage," Edward began, "and we recognize that Ms. Moore has a legitimate ownership stake. However, we must also recognize the consequences of her actions. The company's brand has been destabilized. Investors are nervous. Customers are confused." He paused for effect, folding his hands neatly. "The question is whether we can afford to allow such reckless displays of authority to continue." Selena felt her jaw tighten, but she waited. Marcus' advice echoed in her mind. Let them reveal themselves first. A board member cleared his throat. "Mr. Kane, are you suggesting we curtail Ms. Moore's involvement in management?" Edward spread his palms as if reluctant. "I'm suggesting stability. Horizon needs experienced leadership, not viral drama. We can respect Ms. Moore's ownership while ensuring operational control remains with those who understand the complexities of aviation." It was the move Marcus had predicted strip her of influence without challenging her stake. a legal sidestep dressed as corporate responsibility. Danielle leaned forward, her voice sharp. With respect, what destabilized the brand wasn't Ms. Moore's presence. It was the discriminatory behavior of your staff and the entitled arrogance of certain passengers. She defended herself with truth, and the public responded. That's not recklessness. That's leadership. Edward's smile thinned. Leadership isn't about theatrics, Ms. Price. It's about protecting shareholder value. Selina finally spoke, her voice calm but carrying. Shareholder value doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's tied to trust. If passengers can't trust they'll be treated with dignity, then no amount of champagne or lounge access will save this airline. What happened on Flight 217 wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a symptom of a deeper sickness. The room shifted uneasily. A few directors avoided her gaze. Edward, however, leaned forward, eyes narrowing. And you, a 20-year-old with no experience in aviation, believe you can diagnose this sickness? Selina met his stare, unflinching. I don't need decades in aviation to recognize discrimination. I've lived it since I was old enough to board a plane, and now, unlike the passengers and employees silenced before me, I have the power to do something about it. The silence that followed was heavy. Edward straightened, sensing control slipping. In light of recent events, I propose a vote. A leadership stability provision requiring 10 years of executive aviation experience for anyone exercising operational authority. Marcus muttered under his breath. There it is. Selina understood instantly. The provision wouldn't touch her ownership, but it would lock her out of decision-making. She'd be a silent partner in the company she controlled on paper. Danielle shot up. This is a transparent attempt to neuter Miss Moore's authority. Edward's tone sharpened. It's a safeguard against chaos. The boardroom doors opened suddenly. An assistant entered, whispering urgently into a director's ear. He paled slightly before clearing his throat. Excuse me, but news has just broken. The Department of Transportation has opened an investigation into Horizon's passenger treatment practices. They've cited the viral video as a catalyst. The room erupted in low voices, papers rustling, directors shifting uncomfortably. Selina leaned back, letting the moment swell. That's not chaos, she said quietly, but firmly. That's accountability, and it's only the beginning. Edward tried to recover. This investigation only underscores the need for steady leadership. No, Selina countered. It underscores the need for honest leadership. You've hidden complaints, buried settlements, and trained staff with coded language that dehumanizes passengers. You call it premium service. I call it systemic discrimination. And now the world is watching. Her words landed with the weight of inevitability. The directors' faces told the story. Fear not of Selina, but of exposure, liability, lawsuits. One elderly board member finally spoke, voice trembling. Perhaps we should table this provision until we've reviewed the investigation's findings. Edward's jaw tightened. Delay will only worsen instability. But momentum had shifted. A few others nodded in agreement with tabling. Selina sensed her opening. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small stack of documents, sliding them onto the table. While you debate stability, I've been gathering truth. These are testimonies from former employees, flight attendants, gate agents, even pilots who describe years of discriminatory practices, patterns so consistent they can't be dismissed as anomalies. Danielle distributed copies down the table. The directors scanned the pages, their expressions darkening as they read phrases like comfort adjustment, undesirable passenger profile, appearance-based screening. Selina's voice was steady, but her eyes carried fire. This isn't about me taking a seat on one flight. It's about every passenger who's been told they don't belong. Every employee denied advancement because they didn't fit the mold. Horizon doesn't need to be stable. It needs to be transformed. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the shuffle of papers and the faint hum of the city outside. Edward tried one last angle. Transformation is admirable, Ms. Moore. But revolutions destroy as often as they build. Are you prepared to carry that burden if investors flee? If revenue collapses? If the very company you claim to protect falls under your watch? Selena's reply was simple, but it resonated. I'd rather carry the burden of change than the shame of silence. The boardroom was still again. Then, one by one, heads nodded, not in full allegiance, but in cautious acknowledgment. The vote was postponed. The provision delayed. Edward's smile returned, but this time it was thinner, brittle at the edges. Very well. We'll reconvene when the investigation concludes. Until then, Ms. Moore, I trust you'll remember that majority ownership doesn't make you invincible. Selena gathered her documents, rose, and met his gaze. And I trust you'll remember that hiding behind experience doesn't make you untouchable. As she stepped out of the boardroom with Marcus and Danielle, her heart still pounded, but her stride was steady. She knew the fight had only escalated. Edward would not retreat, but neither would she. The city outside seemed louder that evening, as if New York itself had absorbed the turbulence from Horizon's boardroom. Selena sat in Marcus's loft, a mug of untouched tea cooling on the table before her. The adrenaline of the confrontation had ebbed, leaving behind a fatigue that clung to her limbs. Yet her mind refused rest. The images replayed Edward's cold precision, the board's uneasy silence, the whispered phrases etched into those testimonies she had laid bare. Marcus leaned against the window, arms folded, watching her carefully. You held your ground today. That matters. Selena shook her head. I bought time. That's all. Edward will come back with something sharper. He always does. Danielle, perched on the arm of the sofa, tapped through her phone. He already has. Financial outlets are quoting anonymous sources claiming you staged the flight incident for publicity, that you baited the staff into reacting. Selena exhaled, long and slow. Of course. If they can't erase the truth, they'll smear it. Exactly why we stay ahead, Danielle said firmly. The Department of Transportation investigation buys us leverage, but we need to broaden the story before Edward narrows it again. Show the world this isn't about one girl and one flight. It's systemic. Selena's gaze drifted toward the notebook resting beside her tea. She opened it, scribbling quickly. Smear tactics, no fear response. Must counter with scale, not defense. She closed the book and looked up. Then we gather more voices. Employees, passengers, anyone silenced before. Marcus nodded slowly. You'll need allies. Selena. Not just lawyers and mentors. People inside the company. People who can stand up when you can't be in every room. The next day, that chance arrived. A quiet knock echoed at Marcus's loft. Danielle opened the door to reveal Brenda Collins, the very flight attendant who had tried to move Selena for Victoria Langford. Her uniform was absent now, replaced with jeans and a sweater, but her face carried the weight of sleepless nights. I shouldn't be here, Brenda said quickly. Stepping inside, Edward will crucify me if he finds out. But after the boardroom news spread, I couldn't stay quiet. Selena studied her cautiously. You told me to move seats. Brenda's voice cracked. Because that's what I was trained to do. Not officially, of course. But in training sessions, supervisors made it clear, protect the premium image. That meant older, wealthy, white passengers in the front cabin. They gave us code words, ways to mask it in reports. I I went along with it. Until you. Danielle leaned forward. Are you willing to put that in writing? Brenda hesitated, fear flickering across her face. If I do, I'll lose everything. My job, my pension, my career. Selena's voice was quiet but steady. And if you don't, how many more people will lose their dignity at 30,000 feet? Silence stretched. Brenda finally sat, her shoulders sinking. Then I'll do it. Because you're right. And because I can't unsee your face when I told you to move. I've been carrying it like a stone. Selena felt something shift inside her, not forgiveness yet, but recognition. Brenda's choice carried risk. It also carried power. Over the next week, Brenda became the first of several insiders to step forward. A gate agent recounted instructions to randomly reassign passengers, always skewed toward people of color. A pilot admitted subtle pressure to discourage certain accents in cabin announcements. Each testimony added weight to the growing pile of evidence Danielle organized meticulously. But Edward was not idle. He moved swiftly, summoning press conferences where he reassured investors that rumors and exaggerations would not derail Horizon's stability. He framed Selena as inexperienced and impulsive, hinting she was being manipulated by outside activists with an agenda. His words dripped with paternalistic dismissal. Selena watched one such broadcast late at night, the flickering light of the television casting shadows across her face. Edward's smile was thin, but his control of the narrative was deliberate. He was fighting not just for the company, but for the system that had always protected him. Her stomach knotted. For a moment, doubt crept in. Could she really dismantle something, this entrenched? Could she hold steady against a man who had decades of allies, resources, and influence? Marcus noticed her clenched fists. He spoke softly. Doubt is normal. What you do with it is what matters. She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. What if I fail? Then you'll have done more by trying than anyone else dared. Marcus replied. And if you succeed, you won't just change Horizon, you'll change the sky itself. Those words steadied her. She returned to her notebook, writing courage, action, despite fear. Edward is the symptom, not the disease. Days blurred into strategy sessions, legal filings, and media inquiries. Danielle arranged for Selena to give a controlled interview with a respected journalist, one known for exposing corporate malpractice. Sitting in the studio chair, lights glaring, Selena told her story plainly. She described her parents' experiences, the humiliation they endured, and how those memories fueled her decision to buy controlling shares. She spoke of Flight 217 of the coded systems Brenda had confirmed, of the need for dignity in every seat. Her voice never rose in anger, but the quiet weight of her words carried. Viewers didn't see a child playing at power. They saw a young woman with resolve shaped by lived pain and sharpened by purpose. The interview aired nationwide. Hashtags reignited. Messages poured in from passengers across the country, sharing their own experiences of being sidelined, dismissed, or displaced while flying. A collective story emerged, one bigger than Selena, bigger than Horizon. Edward responded by leaking board documents suggesting Selena's majority stake was under review, hinting at legal maneuvers to dilute her influence. Danielle's team countered quickly, filing injunctions to block any attempt at restructuring ownership without consent. The legal battle lines hardened. Then came the twist no one expected. A subpoena landed on Edward's desk from the Department of Justice, not just the Department of Transportation. Civil rights investigators had opened a formal probe into Horizon's systemic practices. The walls around him began to shift. Marcus delivered the news to Selena in person, a rare smile breaking across his usually stern face. They're coming for him. Not just you fighting in boardrooms anymore. Now it's the law. Selina felt a surge of relief, tempered by caution. He won't go down without dragging everyone with him. And that, Marcus said, is when his empire starts to crack. For the first time in weeks, Selina allowed herself a small, genuine smile. She turned to her notebook and wrote 3 words: "The tide turns." The morning air in Manhattan carried a bite, crisp enough to sting Selina's cheeks as she walked into the law office where Danielle had set up their temporary command center. Reporters lined the sidewalk, their shouted questions forming a wall of noise. Cameras tracked her every step, but she kept her eyes forward, her breath even, her stride steady. Marcus walked just behind her, a silent shield, while Danielle held the door open with brisk efficiency. Inside, the atmosphere was equally charged. Screens along the conference room walls streamed news coverage, each network spinning the story with its own tilt. Some called Selina a brave whistleblower. Others framed her as reckless, even dangerous to investor confidence. One anchor's voice filled the room. The Department of Justice has now confirmed a wide-ranging civil rights investigation into Horizon Airways, spurred by viral footage of 20-year-old shareholder Selina Moore confronting airline staff. The young owner now faces questions about her leadership and the future of the company. Selina set her notebook on the table. Flipping to a fresh page, she wrote a single phrase before the meeting began. "Narrative shapes power." Danielle clicked through slides on her laptop. "Edwards Camp is working overtime. They're feeding outlets stories about your age, your supposed lack of qualifications, even your social life. Expect character assassination at full throttle." Marcus's jaw tightened. Classic playbook. If they can't kill your facts, they'll try to kill your image. Selina looked up from her notebook. "Then we don't just defend my image. We make this about more than me. We widen the lens until it's impossible to ignore what's really at stake." That afternoon, her words were put to the test. A town hall-style meeting had been scheduled with Horizon employees, originally designed as damage control by Edwards' communications team. Selina insisted on attending. Danielle warned it would be hostile. Marcus warned it might be a trap, but Selina refused to back down. The auditorium buzzed with tension as employees filled the seats: pilots, attendants, mechanics, gate agents. Some stared openly. Others whispered behind hands. On stage, a long table of executives sat like guardians of order. Edward occupied the center, his posture perfect, his smile tight. Selina entered to murmurs that rippled across the room. She took her seat at the end of the table, her youth in stark contrast to the graying men around her. Edward tapped the microphone. "Thank you all for coming. Today, we address recent events that have shaken confidence in Horizon Airways. Let me begin by emphasizing that stability and professionalism remain our guiding principles." He gestured towards Selina with a flourish that carried the faintest sting. "Ms. Moore, of course, is welcome to share her perspective." It was bait, offering her a token voice while he framed the narrative. Selina let him finish, then leaned forward, her voice calm, but clear enough to carry through the hall. Stability without justice isn't stability. It's silence. And silence is what allowed discriminatory systems to thrive here for decades. Gas rustled through the crowd. Some nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably. Selina continued, "This isn't about me sitting in a seat on one flight. It's about every employee denied promotion because of who they are. Every passenger humiliated under the guise of premium service. We've all seen it. Many of you have lived it." Her gaze swept the room. Eyes met hers, some hardened, some softening with recognition. Edward cut in, voice sharp. "Miss Moore, while your passion is admirable, the complexities of airline management go beyond social media sound bites." Selina didn't flinch, and yet those sound bites forced an investigation your leadership failed to prevent. Passion didn't destabilize Horizon. Discrimination did. The hall erupted applause from some, murmurs from others. Edward's smile flickered, a crack in his mask. In that moment, a hand rose from the audience. It was Brenda Collins. She stood slowly, her voice trembling at first, but gaining strength. I was there, on Flight 217. I enforced the policies we were trained to enforce, policies that targeted people based on appearance, on race, on class. I can't stay silent anymore. The room went still. Dozens of phones lifted, recording. Edward shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Collins, this is neither the time nor the place. It's exactly the time and place, Brenda interrupted, her voice steady now, because the truth has been buried long enough. The applause this time was louder, sustained. Selina felt a surge of gratitude, tempered by the knowledge of what Brenda had risked by speaking. After the meeting, the media swarmed. Headlines blared within hours. Flight attendant confirms bias at Horizon. Selina Moore gains ally inside Airline. The narrative was no longer Edward versus Selina. It was truth versus denial. But with each gain came backlash. That evening, Selina's phone buzzed with anonymous messages, threats, slurs, warnings to back down. Danielle insisted on increasing security. Marcus pressed her to rest. Yet Selina, sitting alone by the window of her hotel room, opened her notebook again. She wrote, "They fear exposure more than me. That means we're winning." Days later, the fight moved into the courtroom. Danielle filed motions to release Horizon from dozens of non-disclosure agreements tied to discrimination settlements. Edward's lawyers fought fiercely, arguing confidentiality protected corporate integrity. The judge, however, was unmoved. Corporate integrity doesn't outweigh public interest when systemic harm is alleged. She ruled. The documents were unsealed. What spilled out was damning internal memos about premium cabin balance, records of settlements paid quietly, even emails where Edward himself instructed managers to protect brand image at all costs. News outlets devoured the revelations. Public outrage surged. Stock prices dipped, then wavered, then dipped again. Investors demanded answers. Edward appeared on television once more, his voice smooth but strained. Horizon Airways remains committed to fairness. These documents are being taken out of context by individuals seeking attention. Selina watched the broadcast, her hands clenched into fists. Marcus turned off the screen. He's cornered. That's why he's doubling down. But he still holds the COO position, Selina said quietly. As long as he's there, the system still breathes. Marcus studied her, his eyes both proud and worried. Then you know what has to come next. Selina nodded, though the thought weighed on her. The next battle wouldn't be in the press or in court. It would be in the very structure of the company, in the vote that would decide whether Edward remained or fell. That night, alone again. She pressed her forehead against the cool window pane. The city pulsed below, restless and bright. For the first time, her chest ached not just with determination, but with the enormity of what lay ahead. She whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, "Don't let me break before the breaking point." Then she picked up her pen, turned to a clean page, and wrote, "The closer we get, the harder they'll fight. But so will I." The morning of the emergency shareholder meeting arrived with a gray sky over Manhattan, the kind of sky that seemed to press down on the city itself. Selina dressed simply dark slacks, a white blouse, her mother's gold necklace, no power suit, no flashy statement. She wanted her presence to speak louder than her clothes. Marcus waited in the lobby, his tie perfectly knotted, while Danielle reviewed her notes with the precision of a surgeon preparing for delicate work. Remember, Marcus said as they rode the elevator. "Edward will try to control the room with procedure. He's counting on you to falter. Don't give him that satisfaction." Selina nodded, her palms damp, but her face composed. Inside, her thoughts wrestled with themselves, the weight of responsibility, the whispers of doubt, the memory of Brenda's trembling confession. She pressed her notebook against her chest, as if drawing strength from the pages. The boardroom was fuller than usual, with not just directors but representatives of major shareholders, legal teams, and a smattering of journalists allowed for transparency. Edward Kane presided from the center, his polished demeanor intact but his eyes colder than steel. "Ladies and gentlemen," Edward began, "we convene today not in celebration but in crisis. The events of the past weeks have jeopardized Horizon Airways' reputation and stability. While investigations proceed, we must address leadership. Our airline cannot weather storms with inexperience at the helm." He let the words hang, then glanced towards Selina with a smile that wasn't a smile at all. "I propose a vote of no confidence in Ms. Moore's operational authority. Ownership she may have, but leadership requires trust." Murmurs rippled through the room. Cameras clicked. Selina felt every eye on her. For a moment, the silence inside her head was deafening. Then she drew a breath, stood, and stepped forward. "I was told I don't belong in first class. Then I was told I don't belong in this boardroom. And now I'm told I don't belong in leadership." Her voice was quiet but clear, threading through the tension. But belonging isn't granted by those who fear change. It's earned by those who carry truth. Edward's smirk deepened. Inspiration makes for fine speeches. Ms. Moore. But speeches don't keep airplanes in the air. Competence does. Selina opened the folder in her hands and spread photographs across the table. They weren't glossy charts or financial forecasts. They were faces passengers who had written to her since her interview aired. Employees who had come forward with stories. Some smiling, some weary, all real. "Competence is nothing without conscience," Selina said. "These are the people Horizon has failed. Not because we lacked expertise, but because we lacked integrity. Stability isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of justice." One director shifted uncomfortably. Another leaned closer to study the photos. Edward's jaw tightened. Danielle rose next, her lawyer's cadence sharp and unyielding. "We have uncovered years of concealed settlements tied to discriminatory practices that Mr. Kane oversaw directly. If this board votes to preserve his control, you are not voting for stability. You are voting for liability." A hush fell. Even the journalists stilled. Marcus leaned forward, his voice deep and steady. "You want to know who can keep planes in the air? The people who trust the airline enough to buy tickets. Lose their trust, and no expertise will save you." Selina stepped closer to Edward, meeting his gaze without blinking. "You call me reckless, but what's more reckless than ignoring decades of harm? You call me inexperienced, but experience means nothing if it's experience in perpetuating injustice." Edward stood abruptly, his composure cracking. "This is slander. I have dedicated 30 years to this company, first building it from nothing into a leader of the skies." Selina didn't flinch. "And in those 30 years, how many times did you look a passenger in the eye and see a person instead of a profile? How many employees did you silence because their truth threatened your comfort?" The silence was thick enough to choke on. Cameras clicked furiously. Finally, the chair of the board cleared his throat. "We will proceed with the vote." One by one, hands rose. Some trembled. Some were firm. The tally grew. Edward watched, his lips pressed into a thin line. Selina stood still, her notebook clutched at her side. When the count ended, the result was clear. A majority had voted against Edward's motion. He had failed to strip her authority. The no-confidence maneuver collapsed. The room buzzed with low conversations. Edward's face flushed red, his composure shattering in slow cracks. Selina allowed herself one quiet breath of relief, but she knew this wasn't victory. It was survival. After the meeting, she retreated with Marcus and Danielle to a quiet conference room. Her hands trembled as she poured water into a glass. "You held steady," Marcus said softly. "That's how leaders are made." Selina sat, her shoulders slumping for the first time all day. For a moment, "I thought they'd side with him." Danielle's tone was crisp but encouraging. "They didn't. Because you gave them something Edward never could have reasoned to believe in more than numbers. You gave them a conscience." Selina opened her notebook again, writing quickly. "Truth is louder than votes, but votes build bridges." That evening, the news spread like wildfire. Selina Moore survives no confidence vote. Edward Kane fails to oust young owner. Commentators debated endlessly, some praising her composure, others mocking her as naive. But through it all, the footage of her standing against Edward played on repeat. At midnight, Selina sat alone in her hotel room, watching the skyline shimmer. Exhaustion tugged at her, but so did something deeper, resolve mixed with unease. She whispered to the empty room, "This isn't over." Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. "You think you've won, but you've only made yourself a bigger target." Selina stared at the words, her chest tightening. She closed the phone, set it aside, and wrote in her notebook, "Threats mean fear. Fear means cracks. Cracks mean light gets in." Then she lay back, her eyes heavy but her spirit unbroken, knowing the battle lines had shifted again. Word count 1-201. The days after the no-confidence vote blurred into a storm of media coverage, investor calls, and whispered conversations in corporate hallways. Selina moved through it all like someone balancing on a wire, steady on the outside. But inside, her thoughts churned with every step. Each victory seemed to bring with it a new weight. At Marcus's urging, she agreed to a quiet dinner in a private restaurant room far from downtown, away from the cameras. The three of them, Selina, Marcus, and Danielle, sat around a polished oak table while candles flickered softly. For the first time in weeks, the room held no reporters, no executives, no flashing bulbs, just the hum of their voices and the faint clatter of dishes outside. "You're holding it together," Marcus said, studying her carefully. "But I can see the cracks." Selina pushed her fork aside. "What if he's right?" "Who?" Danielle asked. "Edward. What if I really am just a kid playing at leadership? What if people follow me because it's dramatic, not because it's sustainable?" Silence lingered, broken only by the murmur of the restaurant staff. Finally, Marcus leaned forward. "Selina, leadership isn't about knowing every answer. It's about standing firm when everyone else wants to look away. That's what you've done. That's what Edward fears," Danielle added, her tone sharp but warm. "And don't forget, you've already changed the narrative. You forced a system that thrived on silence into the spotlight. That's not drama. That's progress." Selina nodded, but her chest remained tight. When the dinner ended and she returned to her hotel, she found an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a printed photo, her walking into Horizon headquarters, surrounded by cameras. Across the bottom, scrawled in black marker, were the words, "Stay out of the sky." She froze, the photo trembling in her hands. For the first time, true fear pricked her skin. Not fear of Edward's strategies or the board's maneuvers, but of someone unseen, someone willing to step out of the shadows. She called Marcus immediately, within an hour. Security was tightened, yet even with guards outside her room, Selina struggled to sleep. She wrote in her notebook until dawn, "If they're trying to scare me, it means I've hit the core. Fear is their weapon. Resolve must be mine." The next morning brought another blow. News outlets reported that Victoria Langford, the wealthy passenger from Flight 217, had given an interview, draped in pearls and confidence. She claimed Selina had been aggressive on the plane and accused her of exploiting her ownership for personal theatrics. Clips circulated of Victoria sipping tea as she painted herself the victim of a spoiled heiress. Selina watched the interview, anger simmering. Danielle's reaction was immediate. She's coordinated with Edward. This is their counterstrike, turning the entitled passenger into a sympathetic figure. Marcus shook his head slowly. "It's smoke and mirrors." But mirrors are dangerous if the public chooses to see themselves in the wrong reflection. Selina stared at the screen. Victoria's smirk frozen mid-frame. "Then we show them a better mirror." That opportunity came faster than expected. A group of Horizon employees, inspired by Brenda Collins's courage, requested a meeting with Selina. They gathered in a rented community center. Pilots, attendants, ground staff. Some wore uniforms, others civilian clothes, but their expressions carried the same mix of fear and hope. One by one, they shared stories. A young gate agent recalled supervisors pressuring her to downgrade passengers who didn't look premium. A pilot admitted being chastised for suggesting more diverse recruitment. A veteran mechanic revealed wage discrepancies buried under layers of paperwork. Selina listened intently, jotting notes, her heart heavy but resolute. "Your voices matter," she told them. "More than mine, more than Edward's. Together, you can't be ignored." Brenda, seated near the front, raised her hand. "But if we go public, we lose everything." Selina's gaze softened. "Maybe? Or maybe you'll gain something bigger, dignity that can't be bought back with silence." The room quieted. Then, slowly, people nodded. The decision wasn't final, but a seed had been planted. That evening, as Selina returned to her hotel, she found Marcus waiting with urgent news. Edward's making his move again. He's scheduled a press conference tomorrow. Word is he'll announce a restructuring plan to dilute your stake. Selina felt her breath catch. He can't legally do that. Danielle entered, her phone buzzing with alerts. He'll try anyway. He'll spin it as protecting shareholder stability during the investigation. If he sways enough support, you'll spend months locked in litigation while he controls the narrative. Selina sat heavily, her notebook open before her. She stared at the blank page, the pen hovering, until finally she wrote, "Every shadow is cast by light. Expose it." The next day, the press gathered in Horizon's grand atrium. Edward stood at the podium, his posture regal, his voice smooth as he announced necessary steps to safeguard Horizon's future. He spoke of temporary restructuring, professional oversight, and avoiding distractions. He never said Selina's name, but his meaning was razor sharp. As he concluded, a ripple spread through the crowd. Selina had entered the atrium, flanked by Marcus and Danielle. Cameras swung toward her instantly. She walked straight to the podium, her steps calm, her face composed. "Mr. Kane speaks of safeguarding the future," she said, her voice ringing clear. "But the future cannot be safeguarded by burying the past. He speaks of avoiding distractions, but what he calls distractions are the lives of passengers and employees treated as disposable." The room erupted in flashes, reporters shouting over one another. Edward's face stiffened, but Selina pressed on. "This company belongs to more than shareholders. It belongs to every person who steps onto a plane, trusting they'll be treated with dignity. That trust has been broken, And it won't be restored by old systems painted with new words. It will be restored by transformation. Applause broke from some employees clustered in the back. Cameras captured every second. Selina placed her notebook on the podium, opened to a page where she had written in bold ink, "Justice is not a distraction. It is the destination." The image spread within hours. News anchors debated its meaning. Social media flooded with support. Even skeptics admitted her words cut through Edward's polished veneer. That night, Edward convened his closest allies in private. His voice, once calm, cracked with anger. "She's dismantling me piece by piece. If we don't break her soon, she'll own not just the airline, but the narrative forever." But Selina, in her quiet hotel room, wrote another line in her notebook before finally closing her eyes. "They see me as a threat. I see myself as a mirror, and mirrors don't break easily." The morning after her confrontation with Edward at the atrium, Selina awoke to the sound of her phone buzzing relentlessly. Dozens of missed calls, hundreds of messages, and news alerts filled the screen. Clips of her words had gone viral overnight, replayed on every network, dissected by commentators, and remixed across social media. Hashtags bearing her name trended worldwide. Yet not all the coverage was celebratory. Some headlines praised her as a courageous disruptor, while others dismissed her as a reckless heiress exploiting identity politics. Editorials questioned her ability to lead an airline at her age, while pundits debated whether Edward's steady hand or Selina's vision represented the safer bet for shareholders. The court of public opinion had convened, and its verdict was far from unanimous. Selina stood before the hotel window overlooking Manhattan, coffee cooling in her hand. Marcus entered the room, already scrolling through his tablet. "They're coming at you from every direction," he said. "Some say you're the future. Others call you naive." Selina set the cup down, her jaw tight. "It's not about me. It's about whether people believe dignity belongs in business at all." Danielle arrived moments later, her blazer slightly wrinkled from a night of near-sleepless preparation. "We need to be strategic. Edward's allies are lining up. He's secured interviews painting Horizon as a victim of hostile takeover. He's even recruiting passengers like Victoria to amplify his story." Selina frowned. "So he'll flood the media with polished lies while we drip-feed truth. That's not balance." "Then we don't drip-feed," Danielle replied firmly. "We unleash everything: documents, testimonies, financial records. If Edward wants a war of narratives, we give the public the unfiltered picture." Marcus leaned back, skeptical. "That's risky. Once it's out, you can't control how people interpret it. And if any detail is questioned, Edward will twist it into proof you're exaggerating." Selina considered both arguments, her gaze distant. "I've spent years building technology to reveal hidden patterns. Maybe that's exactly what Horizon needs: a floodlight, not a spotlight." Later that afternoon, Selina convened a press briefing of her own. She stood before reporters with Danielle and Marcus by her side. Brenda Collins seated among employees prepared to speak. Behind them, screens displayed documents, training manuals, coded evaluation forms, and budget lines for passenger management. "These aren't my words," Selina said, gesturing to the screens. "These are Horizon's own records. These are the systems that dictated who received dignity and who was denied it." Brenda stepped forward, her voice trembling but steady. "I enforced these policies. I was told to, and I regret it. What I did hurt real people. I can't change the past, but I can testify to the truth." The room buzzed with questions. Cameras flashed. Some reporters pressed aggressively, asking if Selina was weaponizing employees against the company she claimed to save. Others leaned forward, captivated by Brenda's testimony. When the briefing ended, Newsrooms scrambled to verify the evidence. Analysts admitted the documents appeared authentic. Employees anonymously confirmed similar practices. Edwards' camp tried to dismiss it as misinterpretation of internal guidelines, but the phrase rang hollow against the weight of lived stories. That night, Selina returned to her hotel exhausted yet restless. She opened her notebook again. Writing truth doesn't shout. It simply waits until silence is broken. The following day, Edward struck back. He appeared on a primetime talk show, his voice smooth as velvet. "I've dedicated my life to Horizon Airways," he declared, "and I won't let one inexperienced owner destroy it with half-truths and emotional theatrics." He smiled as if the matter were settled, projecting calm certainty. But as the interview aired, something unexpected happened. Horizon employees watching at home began recording their own stories, short videos filmed in kitchens, cars, and break rooms. A black pilot spoke of being denied promotions despite perfect records. A Latina attendant described being told to smile more for certain passengers. An Asian American mechanic revealed wage disparities hidden in budgets. They posted with a shared hashtag, #NaxMyHorizonTruth. Within hours, the hashtag trended higher than Edwards' interview. The floodgate had opened, not from Selina's press briefing alone, but from employees empowered to speak. Each video added weight. Each story chipped at Edwards' credibility. Marcus watched the movement spread, awe in his voice. This isn't just about Horizon anymore. It's becoming a national conversation. Selina nodded slowly. That's the power Edward underestimated. You can silence a person, but you can't silence a chorus. The next blow came from regulators, spurred by the mounting evidence and public outcry. Federal investigators announced an inquiry into Horizon's labor and passenger practices. Headlines declared it the most significant civil rights investigation in the aviation industry in decades. Danielle read the statement aloud in Selina's suite. They're citing systemic discrimination, potential fraud, and obstruction. Edward's not facing bad press anymore. He's facing the law. Selina closed her eyes briefly, exhaling deeply. For the first time, the battle felt less like her burden alone and more like a tide turning on its own weight. Still, the nights remained restless, lying awake. Selina replayed Victoria's interview, Edward's speeches, the faces of employees who risked their jobs to speak. She felt the weight of their trust pressing heavily on her chest. In her notebook, she scribbled at 3 Mem. They believe in me. I must not fail them. But what if believing in me is their mistake? The doubt clawed at her. Yet each morning she rose again, put on her suit, and stepped into the storm. The storm only grew fiercer. Protesters gathered outside Horizon headquarters, some carrying signs supporting Selina, others chanting slogans about corporate stability. News commentators framed it as a generational war, a young black woman disrupting an old guard built on power and profit. Through it all, Edward maneuvered tirelessly. He met with board members in secret, promised stability, hinted at buyouts, yet every time he seemed poised to regain control. Another story surfaced, another employee spoke, another record leaked. His carefully curated empire cracked piece by piece. Finally, late one night, Marcus knocked on Selina's hotel door with urgent eyes. "You need to see this," he said, handing her his tablet. On the screen was a leaked recording Edward's voice, unmistakable, instructing managers to keep certain passengers out of first class and to document removals as safety concerns. The evidence was damning no more denials, no more spin. Selina listened twice, her hand gripping the edge of the desk. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "The truth has teeth now." Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. "Tomorrow, we show it to the world." Selina nodded, exhaustion and determination mingling in her eyes. And when we do, Horizon won't just be on trial. The entire industry will be. The leaked recording of Edward Kane spread faster than wildfire. By dawn, it was playing on every major network. The words cold and unmistakable. Keep certain passengers out of first class. Document removals as safety concerns. The clip was short, but it carried the weight of decades of suspicion suddenly confirmed. Selina sat in the hotel lounge with Marcus and Danielle, their faces lit by the glow of television screens mounted on the walls. Every channel ran the same audio, paired with headlines like Discrimination in the Sky's Horizon, COO Exposed, and Edward Kane's Words Rock Aviation Industry. Marcus exhaled slowly, as though he'd been holding his breath for years. That's it. That's the crack that breaks the dam. Danielle, ever pragmatic, tapped her pen against her notebook. Yes, but Edward won't vanish overnight. He'll claim it was taken out of context, that he was misunderstood. We have to anticipate his spin before he launches it. Selina nodded, her thoughts already racing. Context. He can try, but context won't erase the voices of employees or the stories of passengers. This isn't just about Horizon anymore. It's about an industry that's been hiding behind polished smiles and boarding passes. By mid-morning, Edward faced the cameras himself. Flanked by attorneys, he stood stiffly, jaw set. The leaked audio, he said, represents a private conversation distorted by malicious editing. I have never, nor would I ever, condone discrimination in any form. His denial sounded rehearsed, his smile brittle. Selina watched from the suite. She felt a strange calm as she listened. This time, she realized Edward was not leading the story. He was reacting to it. That afternoon, the Department of Transportation announced a joint investigation with the Department of Justice into systemic discrimination across multiple airlines, citing the Horizon revelations as a catalyst. Reporters swarmed Horizon's headquarters, demanding answers from anyone in uniform. Employees whispered to each other in break rooms. Maybe it's finally changing. Inside a quiet conference room, Selina met with Brenda Collins and a handful of employees who had been at the first community gathering. They were nervous, but resolute. Brenda spoke first. If the government's really investigating, they'll need more than a recording. They'll need patterns, details, testimony. I can help with that. We all can. One by one. The others agreed. A pilot, a gate agent, a mechanic. They each offered to step forward. Despite the risk, Selina looked at them, humbled. You don't know how much this means. What you're doing takes more courage than anything I've done. Brenda shook her head. No. Selina, you lit the match. We're just tired of sitting in the dark. The following day, Selina addressed a town hall broadcast to Horizon employees worldwide. She spoke not from behind a polished podium, but seated at a simple round table, Marcus and Danielle at her side. I won't pretend this is easy, she began. We are facing truths that hurt, truths that many of us suspected but couldn't prove. The leaked recording isn't just about one executive. It's about a culture that told employees to stay quiet and passengers to accept indignity as normal. That ends now. She outlined a series of immediate steps: an anonymous employee reporting system, independent oversight of passenger complaints, and the suspension of any policy linked to discriminatory outcomes. The measures were bold, and some board members bristled, but the response from employees was electric. Messages flooded the internal system. Thank you. About time. Finally, someone listens. Edward, meanwhile, doubled down. He called an emergency shareholder meeting, attempting to frame Selina as reckless and destructive. She is dismantling Horizon's stability with her crusade, he warned, his voice sharp. If we allow this to continue, shareholders will lose billions. But this time, Edward underestimated the tide. Shareholders, wary of legal exposure and public backlash, hesitated. A few even began to question their allegiance. One prominent investor, previously aligned with Edward, released a statement: "Profit cannot come at the cost of dignity. We support reforms." In the days that followed, the conflict spilled beyond corporate walls. Passengers began sharing stories online, many using the hashtag #MeetMyHorizonTruth. Mothers spoke of being humiliated in front of their children. Businessmen admitted they had ignored subtle biases they now regretted. Elderly travelers described being treated as burdens. The stories were raw, unpolished, but together they painted a picture no executive denial could erase. Selina scrolled through them late at night, tears burning her eyes. Each post reminded her of her parents' struggles, the promotions denied, the microaggressions endured. She wrote in her notebook, "This is bigger than me, bigger than Horizon. This is every voice that was told to sit down, now standing together." One evening, Marcus found her staring out at the skyline, her notebook open. "You've done what many thought impossible," he said gently. Selina didn't turn from the window. "Then why does it feel like it's just beginning?" "Because it is," Marcus replied. "Exposing the wound is one thing. Healing it is another." The true tipping point arrived a week later, when federal agents executed a search warrant at Horizon's headquarters. Cameras captured the moment investigators carrying boxes of files past stunned employees. Reporters shouted questions. The footage looped endlessly on the news, a symbol of accountability descending at last. Edward tried one final move. He appeared at the courthouse steps, his voice rising with desperation. "This is a witch hunt," he declared. "A coordinated attempt to destroy me and this company. Selina Moore is using her wealth and influence to rewrite history." But the crowd that gathered outside wasn't buying it. Some shouted back, demanding justice. Others held signs with Selina's words, "Justice is not a distraction. It is the destination," inside her suite. Selina watched the coverage quietly. Danielle placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "He's unraveling. The more he fights, the more the truth shows." Selina nodded slowly. She closed her notebook and whispered, "Then we're past the tipping point. Now comes the fall." The morning after federal agents walked into Horizon's headquarters, the entire aviation industry seemed to freeze. Competitor airlines issued carefully worded statements about their commitment to fairness, while regulators confirmed that Horizon was only the first target in what could become a sweeping investigation. News anchors compared the moment to previous corporate reckonings, calling it a watershed for air travel. Selina sat in a small meeting room at the hotel with Marcus and Danielle, both visibly weary but determined. A pot of coffee sat untouched in the center of the table. They had been running on adrenaline for weeks, but now the weight of what lay ahead pressed down on all of them. Danielle broke the silence. "The Justice Department wants you to testify. They're building a case not just against Edward, but against the systems that allowed this to thrive. They want Horizon's internal data, the reports, the hidden settlements, all of it." Selina exhaled, her hands tightening around her notebook. "If I testify, Edward will paint it as betrayal of the company I'm supposed to lead." Marcus leaned forward, his tone calm but steady. "Selina, you are not betraying the company. You're saving it. There's a difference between protecting a business and protecting corruption. Don't confuse the two." She nodded slowly, writing in her notebook, "Truth isn't betrayal. Silence is." Later that day, she walked into Horizon's employee cafeteria, unannounced. Conversations hushed as workers recognized her. She carried no entourage, only her notebook and a cup of coffee. Standing at the center, she addressed them plainly. I know you're scared. I am too. But fear has been our prison for too long. The systems Edward built told us that speaking up would cost us our jobs, our dignity, our futures. But look at where silence has brought us. Investigators in our offices, headlines on every screen, passengers who no longer trust us. The silence didn't protect us. It destroyed us. Her words carried through the room, echoing in the stillness. Employees exchanged glances, some nodding, some blinking back tears. From today, Selina continued, we will not be a company that hides behind silence. If you have been harmed, tell your story. If you've seen injustice, speak it. You will not be punished for the truth. Not anymore. The room erupted in cautious applause. For the first time, employees felt the freedom to break decades of fear. That evening, anonymous testimonies began pouring into the new reporting system Selina had launched. Stories of passengers humiliated, employees sidelined, promotions denied. Danielle's legal team worked overnight to categorize them, building a body of evidence that confirmed what the leaked recording had only hinted at. Meanwhile, Edward scrambled. His legal team filed motions to suppress the leaked recording, to block employee testimony, even to question Selina's ownership stake. But with each move, the tide turned further against him. One night, Marcus found Selina in the hotel lobby, staring at her phone. On the screen was a message from a Horizon mechanic in Denver, thanking her for giving him the courage to speak after 20 years of silence. Selina's eyes shimmered. Every time I think I can't carry this anymore, someone reminds me why I must. Marcus smiled softly. That's leadership, not the power you hold, but the hope you give. The following week, Selina entered a packed congressional hearing room. Cameras lined the back wall. Journalists scribbled furiously, and committee members leaned forward as she took her seat. Edward sat a few rows behind, his face tight, his attorneys whispering urgently. Selina adjusted the microphone. Her voice was steady but filled with emotion. I never intended to become the owner of an airline. But when discrimination tried to silence me on one flight, I realized silence was the very system keeping thousands of others voiceless. Horizon Airways was not just failing me. It was failing every passenger and employee who looked different, sounded different, or came from a background the system did not value. This is bigger than one company. It is about whether equality is negotiable in American business. And I say it is not. The room broke into murmurs, some members visibly moved. When a congressman asked what reform she proposed, Selina answered without hesitation. Transparency, independent oversight, and accountability. No more secret settlements. No more policies that look neutral, but target the vulnerable. If airlines cannot guarantee equal treatment, then they cannot claim to serve the public. The testimony made headlines for days. Some praised her as a reformer with vision. Others criticized her as naive and dangerous to corporate stability. But the conversation had shifted irreversibly. Discrimination in the skies was no longer a whisper. It was front-page news. That night, back at the hotel, Selina sat by the window, her notebook open. The city lights shimmered, a mosaic of hope and struggle. She wrote, "We are breaking the silence. One voice at a time, and once silence breaks, it cannot be repaired, only replaced with truth." The day after Selina's congressional testimony, the energy at Horizon Airways shifted. Employees walked into offices with a new confidence, as if speaking the truth had lifted an invisible weight from their shoulders. Posters with the words "justice is not a distraction. It is the destination" began appearing on bulletin boards in break rooms and hangars. No one claimed responsibility, but everyone seemed to know who had inspired them. Edward Kane, however, was far from defeated. From his corner office at Horizon headquarters, He paced restlessly, his suit jacket discarded, his tie loosened. His advisors clustered around the polished conference table, their faces pale. The leaked audio, the testimonies, the congressional hearing, it was all unraveling faster than they could contain. Edward slammed his palm against the table. Do you think I built this empire to have it dismantled by a 20-year-old with a notebook? She doesn't know this industry. She doesn't know what it takes to survive. If she wants war, I'll give her war. His chief counsel hesitated. Sir, the evidence is overwhelming. The federal investigation is expanding. Suppression motions are failing. If we push harder, we risk obstruction charges. Edward glared. Then we don't push harder. We push smarter. We find her weakness. Everyone has one. That same evening, Selina sat in her hotel suite surrounded by documents spread across the table. Danielle was briefing her on the progress of the federal case, while Marcus quietly reviewed internal memos from employees. There's something you need to know, Danielle said carefully. Edward's lawyers filed a motion challenging your acquisition of majority shares. They're claiming irregularities in the transfer, suggesting your purchase was orchestrated through shell companies. Selina's brow furrowed. That's ridiculous. Every transaction was legal and transparent. Marcus leaned forward. Edward doesn't need to win the argument. He just needs to drag it out, create doubt, make the board and shareholders question your legitimacy. Selina closed her eyes for a moment, pressing her fingers against her temples. The pressure was unrelenting first, the fight for dignity. Now the fight for ownership itself. Then we show them everything. Full transparency. Every document, every contract, every signature. If they want to audit me, let them. I've got nothing to hide. Danielle nodded, though her eyes held concern. You're right, but remember, Edward isn't playing by the same rules. He thrives on shadows. You thrive on light. That's why he fears you. The next morning, Edward launched his counteroffensive. An anonymous op-ed appeared in a major financial paper, questioning whether Selina was truly the owner of Horizon or just a figurehead for undisclosed investors. The article painted her as naive, manipulated by unseen forces, unfit to lead. Selina read the piece over breakfast, her jaw tightening. Marcus glanced at her. It's Edward's playbook. Undermine your credibility, make you doubt yourself. She scribbled in her notebook, they can question my ownership, but they cannot question my truth. By afternoon, Selina decided to face the storm directly. She scheduled an emergency press conference at Horizon headquarters. Standing before reporters, she held up a thick binder. This, she declared, is every record of my acquisition. Not redacted, not summarized. The truth, page by page. If anyone doubts my legitimacy, they can examine it themselves. The room buzzed as cameras zoomed in on the binder. Selina's voice sharpened. I will not hide behind lawyers or excuses. I became majority owner legally. And I will use that ownership to build a company worthy of the people who depend on it. The bold move won her praise from transparency advocates and employees alike. Yet Edward, watching from his office, smiled coldly. She's playing checkers, he muttered. I'm playing chess. That evening, Selina received a call from Brenda Collins. Her voice trembled. Selina, I think they're watching me. A car's been outside my house all day, and I've been getting calls, blocked numbers, silence when I answer. Selina's chest tightened. You're not alone. Brenda, we'll make sure you're safe. She hung up and immediately contacted Danielle and Marcus. Danielle's face hardened. Edward's trying intimidation now. He wants to scare witnesses into silence. Marcus slammed his fist softly against the table. He's desperate. Desperation makes men dangerous. Selina stared out the window at the glowing skyline, the city pulsing with life. She whispered to herself, "If he thinks fear will silence us, he's forgotten the lesson of Flight 217. We don't move anymore. Not for him, not for anyone." The following day, federal prosecutors announced witness protection measures for employees cooperating in the investigation. Brenda, though shaken, agreed to continue her testimony. Her courage inspired others, and soon more employees stepped forward, determined to break the culture of silence. Edward's frustration boiled over. In a closed-door board meeting, he lashed out, "You think this girl can run an airline? You think she can survive federal scrutiny when they're done with me? They'll come for all of you, and you'll wish you had stood by me." But the board members, once loyal, now exchanged uneasy glances. Selina's transparency had given them a lifeline, while Edward's denials dragged them deeper into quicksand. Meanwhile, Selina prepared for another critical moment, a second congressional hearing, this time focused on corporate accountability. She knew Edward would be watching, waiting for her to falter. The night before, Marcus found her seated at the desk, her notebook open but blank. "What's holding you back?" he asked. Selina sighed. "It's not the words. It's the weight. Every time I speak, I feel like the entire world is listening, waiting for me to fail." Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. "Do you know why your words matter? Because they're not just yours. They're echoes of everyone who couldn't speak before. You're not carrying the weight alone. You're carrying it with them." Selina closed her eyes, absorbing his words. Slowly, she wrote, "Voices shared are burdens halved." The next morning, as she stepped into the hearing room, she felt the weight still pressing, but now it pressed like a steady hand at her back, urging her forward. The second congressional hearing was held in a grand chamber, the kind of room designed to remind everyone present of history's weight. Chandeliers glowed overhead, marble columns rose like sentinels, and cameras lined the back wall, broadcasting every word to millions of viewers. Selina Moore walked in with Marcus and Danielle at her side, her notebook tucked under her arm. The air vibrated with expectation. This time, Edward Kane was seated at the opposite end of the witness table. His attorneys flanked him, whispering advice, while his eyes locked on Selina with a mixture of fury and determination. The narrative he had carefully constructed for decades was slipping, and he knew Selina was the one tearing it apart. The chairperson opened the session briskly. "We are here to examine the systemic failures at Horizon Airways and the broader implications for the aviation industry. Today, we will hear testimony from Ms. Selina Moore and Mr. Edward Kane." Edward went first. His voice carried the same polished authority he had honed over years of boardrooms and press conferences. Horizon Airways is an institution built on safety, reliability, and service. I deeply regret that certain policies have been misinterpreted, but these were never about discrimination. They were about operational stability. He leaned forward, hands clasped, as though in prayer. "Miss Moore, though well-intentioned, does not understand the complexities of this industry. She sees conspiracy where there is none. She risks dismantling decades of progress with her accusations." Selina listened silently, her expression unreadable. When it was her turn, she adjusted the microphone and opened her notebook. The camera zoomed in on her calm face, on the words handwritten across the page. "Progress," she began, "is not measured by how long something has lasted. It is measured by who it has served. For decades, Horizon served those who fit a narrow profile, while others were told explicitly or implicitly that they did not belong. That is not stability. That is exclusion dressed as order." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Selina continued, her voice steady. Mr. Kane speaks of policies misinterpreted. Let me be clear. Policies that consistently disadvantage people of color are not misinterpretations. They are discrimination, codified in corporate language. One congresswoman leaned forward. Ms. Moore, can you provide an example? Selina nodded. She tapped the binder before her. This is Horizon's internal manual for passenger categorization. You'll notice the phrase priority profiles. In practice, it meant white, male, wealthy travelers received upgrades and accommodations denied to others. Employees were instructed to document removals as safety issues rather than admit bias. This is not speculation. These are Horizon's own words. Gasps echoed. Edward shifted uncomfortably, his attorneys whispering frantically. Selina paused, her gaze sweeping the room. And yet, the issue isn't just Horizon. It's an industry where silence has been normalized, where dignity has been treated as optional. If this committee wants real accountability, it must go beyond one company. It must demand transparency from all airlines. Applause broke out from the audience section before the chairperson banged the gavel for order. Cameras caught the moment, transmitting it instantly across networks and social media. When the questioning resumed, Edward tried to interject, but his voice cracked with frustration. This is grandstanding. She's a child with no grasp of responsibility. I built Horizon into a leader of the skies while she was still in school. Selina turned toward him, her expression firm but calm. And yet, Mr. Kane, in all your years of leadership, did you ever once ask who was being left behind? Did you ever see the passengers who weren't welcome in your version of the skies? Edward opened his mouth, but no answer came. The silence hung heavy, broadcast to millions. By the time the hearing adjourned, the headlines had already written themselves. Selina Moore stuns Congress with evidence of systemic bias. Edward Kane stumbles under fire, back in her hotel suite. Selina collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion flooding her body. Marcus poured her a glass of water, his deep voice warm with pride. You didn't just survive today. You shifted the ground under his feet. Danielle sat across from her, flipping through her notes. Be prepared, Edward won't take this quietly. He'll try something reckless. He's a cornered man now. Selina closed her notebook, her fingers brushing across the cover. Then let him try. Every move he makes only shows the world who he really is. That night, as she stared at the city lights from her window, her phone buzzed with messages of support employees thanking her, passengers sharing their own stories, strangers calling her an inspiration. But beneath the encouragement was a gnawing question she couldn't escape. If Edward strikes back, how many more will get hurt before this is over? The morning after the second congressional hearing, Edward Kane arrived at Horizon's headquarters before dawn. He moved through the empty corridors like a general surveying a battlefield he was losing. His reflection in the glass walls startled him, creased face, eyes rimmed red. His once unshakable aura now eroded, yet his pride refused to accept defeat. In his office, a cluster of loyal executives waited. Edward slammed a folder onto the table. If the law won't protect us, then we protect ourselves. We launch Project Phoenix now. One executive hesitated. Sir, that was designed as a contingency for hostile takeovers. It's extreme. Edward's eyes burned. So is losing everything to a girl with a notebook. The plan was ruthless restructure divisions overnight, transfer assets into shell companies, and present shareholders with a choice support Edward or risk financial collapse. It was a desperate gambit, but desperation had become Edward's only companion. Across town, Selina sat with Marcus and Danielle in their hotel suite. the television flickering with endless coverage of her testimony. Marcus studied her carefully. Edward's too quiet. That's not a good sign. Danielle nodded grimly. I've been hearing whispers. Something about asset transfers. If he moves quickly, he could strip Horizon before regulators freeze him out. Selena's hand tightened on her notebook. He'd burn the house down just to stop me. Exactly, Danielle said, which means we have to act before he lights the match. Later that afternoon, Brenda Collins arrived unannounced, visibly shaken. She clutched a small flash drive. I shouldn't even have this, she said, her voice trembling. It's from an internal system I still have access to. Edward's moving money, millions. If this goes unchecked, he'll leave the airline hollow. Selena took the drive gently. Brenda, you've already risked so much. Brenda shook her head. No. Selena, you risked everything first. This is the least I can do. Danielle plugged the drive into her laptop, scanning the files. Her eyes widened. She's right. These transfers are happening in real time. He's trying to siphon Horizon's assets into private accounts. If regulators don't act within hours, he'll succeed. Selena felt a surge of anger, not just at Edward, but at the system that had enabled him for so long. She scribbled furiously in her notebook, "Corruption doesn't go quietly. It tries to steal the silverware on its way out." That evening, Selena made a decision. She called a press conference, unannounced, in front of Horizon's headquarters. The night air was cool, cameras buzzing as reporters gathered in confusion. Selena stepped to the podium, binder in one hand, notebook in the other. "Tonight," she began, her voice ringing clear against the city hum, "we reveal not just discrimination, but deception. Evidence has come to light that Horizon's COO, Edward Kane, is orchestrating secret transfers of company assets, stripping the airline while under federal investigation. This is not leadership. This is looting." Gasps rose from the crowd. Reporters shouted questions. Selena held the notebook high. For too long, Edward Kane has hidden behind polished speeches and corporate jargon. No more. Tonight, I call on regulators to freeze Horizon's accounts, to protect its employees, and to hold its leaders accountable. Within minutes, the story exploded. News outlets rushed to verify the files. Federal investigators, watching the broadcast, confirmed the transfers and moved to secure Horizon's finances. Edward's desperate gambit had been exposed before it could succeed. In his office, Edward watched the press conference on mute. His hand shook as he poured a drink, amber liquid splashing against the glass. For the first time, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself in decades, the weight of inevitable collapse. The next morning, federal agents arrived with subpoenas. Cameras captured Edward being ushered into a waiting car, his face pale, lips pressed into a hard line. Commentators called it the fall of a titan. But for Selena, the victory was bittersweet. In the hotel suite, Marcus read the headlines aloud, his voice triumphant. "You did it. You stopped him." Selena sat quietly, staring out the window at the rising sun. "I didn't stop him soon enough. How many lives were harmed before this? How many voices were silenced while he thrived?" Danielle placed a hand on her shoulder. "Selena, you can't carry every wound of the past. What matters is what you're building now." Selena opened her notebook and wrote slowly, "Justice isn't revenge. It's rebuilding what was broken." That evening, Horizon employees gathered in the cafeteria, watching live coverage of Edward's arrest. For the first time in years, laughter and applause filled the room. Brenda sat among them, tears streaming down her face. "We're free," she whispered. Selena joined them later. No podium, no cameras, just her presence. She looked around the room at the faces of mechanics, attendants, pilots, and agents. "This isn't my victory," she told them softly. "It's yours. You chose to speak. You chose truth over fear. And together, we're going to build something worthy of that courage." The applause that followed wasn't loud or orchestrated. It was warm, genuine, and full of hope. Back in her suite, Selina closed her notebook with a final line for the day. "The fire he lit was meant to burn me. Instead, it revealed the path forward." The days following Edward Kane's arrest unfolded like an unraveling tapestry, each thread exposing a deeper rot within the airline industry. Horizon was no longer the only focus. Selina's testimony and the cascade of documents from Brenda Collins had ignited a wave of scrutiny. Federal investigators widened their net, pulling in other airlines, industry associations, and consulting firms that had quietly built discriminatory systems into the foundation of modern air travel. For Selina, the sudden expansion was both vindicating and daunting. She sat with Marcus and Danielle in a small conference room, stacks of subpoenas and media reports spread across the table. Marcus tapped a headline that blared across the morning news: 3 major airlines under federal probe following Horizon scandal. "This isn't just about Horizon anymore," Marcus said gravely. "It's about the entire industry." Selina leaned back, exhaustion in her eyes. "That's what scares me. If this spreads too far, they'll try to paint me as the destroyer of jobs, of livelihoods. They'll twist it into an attack on an industry instead of a call for accountability." Danielle shook her head firmly. "They'll try, yes. But remember, you're not tearing anything down. You're exposing what was already broken." The weight of that distinction pressed heavily on Selina's shoulders. She wanted transformation, not destruction. Yet, she knew systemic change always came with resistance, always came with narratives designed to silence reformers. Later that week, Selina was invited to testify again, this time not before a transportation subcommittee, but before the full congressional oversight panel. The stakes were enormous. Cameras captured her walking up the marble steps of Capitol Hill, notebook tucked under her arm, her face calm but resolute. Inside the chamber, executives from rival airlines sat stiffly in tailored suits. Some whispered among themselves. Others stared straight ahead. Selina could feel their hostility, but she also noticed employees in the gallery, their faces eager, waiting for someone to speak a truth they had long suspected but feared to voice. When her turn came, Selina stood, adjusting the microphone. She didn't launch into statistics immediately. Instead, she began with a story. "When I was 13, she said softly, "I watched my mother come home from a long flight. She was exhausted, not from the work itself, but from the way she was treated, spoken over, dismissed, passed for promotions. She told me something I'll never forget. The hardest part isn't being tired, Selina. It's knowing your effort will never be seen as equal." The room grew quiet. Even the executives leaned in. Selina continued, her voice steady, each word carrying the rhythm of lived experience. "What we've uncovered at Horizon is not a series of accidents. It is not the work of one rogue executive. It is a system designed, enforced, and normalized meant to privilege certain passengers and employees at the expense of others. It is a system that taught attendants to code discrimination into words like cabin balance or customer quality. A system that denied opportunities to pilots because their last names didn't sound the way the board preferred. A system that told people like me, and like so many of you, that dignity is conditional." She flipped her notebook open, reading a line she had written the night before. "Discrimination doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers in policy, in practice, in silence. And silence is what allows it to thrive." Reporters' pens scratched furiously. Committee members leaned closer. Selena then laid out her vision not just for Horizon, but for an industry-wide transformation, transparent reporting, independent oversight, and the creation of an equitable aviation alliance where airlines would compete not only on comfort and price, but on fairness and dignity. As she concluded, applause erupted not from the committee, who maintained procedural neutrality, but from the gallery where employees and advocates sat. The sound was raw, unfiltered, and powerful. After the hearing, Selena walked out into the bright afternoon light. Cameras flashed, microphones pushed toward her, voices shouting questions. But in the middle of the chaos, she noticed something that steadied her: a small group of flight attendants, still in uniform, holding signs that read, "We believe you and accountability now," back at Horizon. The reform she had set in motion began to take root. The Independent Ethics Committee held its first open forum, inviting employees to speak anonymously or publicly about their experiences. Brenda sat nervously in the front row, listening as colleagues described years of humiliation and subtle punishments. When it was her turn to speak, she stood shakily, gripping the podium. "I was part of it," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I enforced rules that weren't fair. I told myself I didn't have a choice. But the truth is, I did. And I chose wrong. I can't undo the harm, but I can help make sure no one else is put in that position again." The room was silent. Then, slowly, applause rose not for what Brenda had done in the past, but for her willingness to confront it openly. Selena, watching from the back, felt a quiet relief. The journey toward healing was beginning, fragile but real. The changes didn't go unnoticed by the public. Customers began posting about their experiences on social media, stories of attendants treating every passenger with care, of promotions awarded based on merit, of complaints addressed transparently. Horizon's reputation, once tarnished, began to recover. Stock prices, predicted to plummet, stabilized, and then climbed steadily. Analysts begrudgingly admitted that ethics and profitability were no longer in conflict. Still, the backlash was fierce. Industry lobbyists accused Selena of destabilizing air travel. Certain shareholders grumbled about lost influence. Even some passengers complained about the new emphasis on equality, claiming it diluted the prestige of premium service. Selena read the critiques, each one like a thorn. But she reminded herself of something Marcus had said: progress never pleases everyone. The louder the resistance, the more you know you're hitting the right nerve. One evening, Selena visited her mother's grave. The sky was painted in hues of orange and purple, the air still. She knelt, laying fresh flowers against the stone. "Mom," she whispered, "I wish you could see it. They tried to erase us, but now the whole world is watching. I carry your strength in every word I speak." Her eyes brimmed with tears, but they weren't only of grief. They carried something new, something steadier. Hope. The following week, Selena returned to Horizon's headquarters for a company-wide broadcast. The circular boardroom table had been installed, replacing the old mahogany slab. Screens displayed not just financial metrics, but diversity and equity indicators, visible to everyone. Employees filled the seats and lined the walls. Waiting, Selena stood at the center, notebook in hand. "We are no longer hiding from our past," she said firmly. "We are confronting it, learning from it, and transforming it. This company will not measure success only in dollars, but in dignity." The room erupted with applause. For the first time, Horizon Airways felt less like a corporation and more like a community. That night, Selena wrote her closing thought in her notebook: "Change is slow, change is costly, but change is possible, and once it begins, it cannot be contained." In the weeks that followed the oversight panel hearing, Selena Moore's life became a blur of board meetings, press briefings, and late-night strategy sessions. Horizon Airways had transformed almost overnight into a symbol of corporate accountability, but that transformation came with relentless demands. She often found herself awake past midnight, her notebook open, words spilling onto the page in handwriting that grew shakier with each passing day. One evening, Marcus Hill found her slouched over the circular boardroom table, documents scattered around her. He gently set a cup of chamomile tea beside her and sat across the table. "You're running yourself into the ground," Marcus said quietly. Selena rubbed her temples. "Everywhere I look, there's something: broken promotion criteria, service protocols, complaint channels. If I stop pushing, even for a second, I'm afraid it'll all slide back." Marcus studied her with the patience of someone who had carried similar burdens before. "Selena, systems don't change in a day. You planted the seed. Now you have to let others help it grow." His words lingered in her mind long after he left. Later that night, she wrote in her notebook, "Leadership is not carrying everything. It's building a community that refuses to let injustice return." The next morning, Horizon launched its public transparency dashboard, an online platform displaying quarterly statistics on discrimination complaints, investigations, and resolutions. For the first time, passengers and employees alike could see how the company was confronting its failures. The bold move drew both praise and skepticism. "This is dangerous," one analyst said on a business news segment. "Admitting flaws publicly could scare away investors." But within days, the opposite happened. Customers praised the honesty. Advocacy groups lauded Horizon for setting a new standard. Share prices, far from plummeting, climbed higher as trust began to replace cynicism. Still, resistance festered in quieter corners. Anonymous emails landed in Selena's inbox, accusing her of ruining tradition. Flyers circulated online, calling her a divisive figure. Some elite passengers canceled their memberships in protest of Horizon's overcorrection. Danielle Price, ever the realist, warned Selena to prepare. "Backlash is inevitable. They'll frame you as the radical who destabilized an entire industry." Selena nodded. "Let them. I'd rather be called radical for demanding dignity than silent while people are humiliated." Amid the turbulence, a different kind of challenge emerged. Horizon's ethics committee announced its first case review involving a senior executive accused of suppressing discrimination complaints. The evidence was damning emails, whistleblower testimonies, and financial records showing deliberate concealment. When the committee voted to terminate the executive, the decision sent shockwaves through Horizon. It was the first time someone at such a high level had been publicly held accountable. Some employees celebrated, others whispered uneasily, fearful of what might come next. Selena addressed the company directly in a broadcast. "Accountability is not punishment. It's the foundation of trust. We cannot build a future worth believing in if we protect the systems that harmed us." Her calm conviction reassured many, but the toll it took on her was evident in her quieter moments. Late one night, she confided to Danielle, "Every time we take a step forward, it feels like I'm bracing for the next battle. I don't know how long I can keep this pace." Danielle placed a hand on hers. "You don't have to fight them all alone. That's why you built the circle, so the weight is shared." The circle Danielle referred to was the new boardroom table, now symbolic of Horizon's cultural shift. It wasn't just furniture. It was a living metaphor: decisions made together, voices equal, no one seated higher than another. Employees often remarked how different meetings felt, how the absence of hierarchy gave them courage to speak. One afternoon, Selena walked into the cafeteria unannounced, tray in hand. Conversations hushed at first, employees unsure how to react to their new leader eating among them. Then someone broke the silence with a laugh. And soon the room buzzed again, more vibrant than before. Sitting beside Brenda Collins, Selina smiled. "Feels different, doesn't it?" Brenda nodded. "For years, we were afraid of even whispering complaints. Now, people actually believe someone is listening." That night, Selina wrote in her notebook, "Trust grows not from speeches, but from being present." As Horizon's transformation gained momentum, Selina's influence stretched beyond the company. The Equitable Aviation Alliance, which had begun as a modest proposal, now included 5 major airlines. Under pressure from public opinion and federal investigations, they agreed to shared standards, transparent complaint processing, demographic audits, and independent oversight. During the Alliance's first public forum, a journalist asked Selina, "Do you believe you can actually change an industry?" This entrenched Selina paused, then answered with a quiet certainty. "Systems are built by people, and what people build, people can unbuild. The real question isn't if we can change it, but whether we have the courage to try." Her words spread widely, quoted in newspapers and replayed on evening news programs. Advocacy groups began adopting her phrase as a rallying cry. What people build, people can unbuild. Yet, behind the spotlight, Selina wrestled with loneliness. In hotel rooms between hearings, she found herself staring at old photographs of her parents, her father in his worn pilot's jacket, her mother smiling in her flight attendant uniform. She whispered to them as if they could hear, "I hope I'm doing this right. I hope this fight honors everything you endured." The next day, Horizon hosted its first remembrance ceremony, inviting former employees who had suffered discrimination to share their stories publicly. The event was raw, filled with tears and moments of silence that spoke louder than words. A retired black pilot described being denied promotions 11 times. A Latina attendant recounted being disciplined for speaking Spanish to passengers. Each story pierced the room with its weight. When it was Selina's turn to speak, she didn't offer grand rhetoric. She simply said, "We cannot undo the past, but we can choose to carry its lessons forward. To those who were silenced, we hear you now, and we will not forget." The room rose to its feet in applause, but the sound was less celebratory and more reverent, as if acknowledging both grief and healing. That evening, Selina wrote her final note for the day. Justice is not an endpoint. It is the ongoing act of remembering and rebuilding. The burden of transformation was heavy, but for the first time, Selina felt she was not carrying it alone. The transformation of Horizon Airways had reached a point few thought possible, but for Selina Moore, the journey was far from complete. Every day brought new challenges, not from outside forces alone, but from within her own ranks. Change had inspired hope, yes, but it also unearthed hidden fractures. One Monday morning, Selina walked into the new Ethics Committee office. A tense meeting was already underway. Committee members debated heatedly over a recent complaint filed by a passenger who alleged racial profiling during boarding. Some argued it was an isolated incident. Others insisted it revealed deeper cracks that had survived reform. Selina listened carefully before speaking. We cannot pretend that one policy shift erased decades of training and bias. Mistakes will happen. The question is, how do we respond if our system cannot withstand scrutiny? Then it isn't truly reformed. Her words calmed the room, but the weight behind them pressed against her chest. Later, in her private office, she scribbled in her notebook, "Change is not the absence of failure. It is the refusal to excuse it." Outside the company, media pressure intensified. Tabloids framed her as a young radical dismantling aviation tradition. Others painted her as a corporate savior. Neither narrative felt true to her. in quiet moments. Selina confessed to Marcus Hill. They see me as a symbol, not a person. They don't see the fear I carry every night. Marcus leaned back, his deep voice steady. Symbols are born when people refuse to shrink from battles that matter. Fear doesn't diminish you, it proves the stakes are real. Meanwhile, Edward Kane's legal saga continued. Though stripped of his position, he remained defiant, his lawyers arguing that Selina's reforms were built on exaggerated claims. News clips showed him exiting the courthouse, cameras flashing, his tone dripping with venom. She's destroying what we built. Horizon will regret following her. Selina watched the broadcast in silence, her jaw clenched. Danielle Price, seated beside her, muttered, "Let him talk. His words dig his grave deeper." But Selina's mind spun. Edward's arrogance wasn't just bluster. It was fuel for those who still clung to the old system. At the same time, the Equitable Aviation Alliance faced its first major fracture. A participating airline, feeling pressure from shareholders, announced it was withdrawing, claiming the transparency requirements were burdensome. The move threatened the fragile coalition, and journalists immediately turned to Selina for comment. At the Emergency Alliance meeting, she stood before executives from 5 airlines, the air thick with tension. If one of us breaks faith, the public will assume all of us were never serious, she said firmly. We must decide whether this is a publicity stunt or a genuine commitment. The executives murmured, some visibly uncomfortable. Selina continued, lowering her voice to a near whisper that nonetheless commanded attention. This is not about convenience. This is about dignity. If accountability is too heavy, then perhaps leadership is not what you were meant for. The room fell silent. Slowly, one by one, hands went up, reaffirming their participation. The wavering airline, shamed by the collective will, agreed to return. Afterward, Danielle caught Selina in the hallway. That was risky. You almost lost them. Selina exhaled slowly. Better to lose them for the right reason than keep them for the wrong one. Her words spread beyond the room, quoted in industry reports. Employees began repeating them as a kind of mantra. Better to lose for the right reason than keep for the wrong one. Yet for all her public strength, the pressure gnawed at her. In the quiet of her suite one night, she clutched her mother's pendant and whispered, "How do I keep carrying this? How do I stay strong when every win just brings another battle?" Her phone buzzed a message from Brenda Collins. It was a photo of a group of flight attendants, smiling in their new training class, captioned, "We believe again." "Thank you." Selina smiled faintly. Sometimes the smallest gestures carried the greatest weight. 2 weeks later, she faced her sternest test. Yet Horizon's annual shareholder assembly, historically, the event had been a stage for executives like Edward Kane to boast about profits. Now, all eyes were on Selina to prove that reform had not just reshaped culture, but secured financial stability. The hall was packed. Investors whispered nervously as Selina stepped onto the stage. Behind her, screens displayed not only profit margins but also employee satisfaction graphs, diversity metrics, and complaint resolution statistics. This year, she began. We measure success differently. We measure it not only in revenue, but in fairness. Not only in growth, but in dignity. And I'm proud to show you that these values are not in conflict, they are inseparable. She detailed how employee engagement had boosted efficiency, how transparent systems had reduced costly lawsuits, how inclusive marketing had attracted new customers. Each point was backed by data, each graph telling a story of progress. Finally, she paused and looked directly at the crowd. Horizon has always prided itself on reaching great heights. But true height is not altitude, It is integrity, and integrity is what will sustain us." The room erupted in applause, some investors even standing. For the first time, Selina felt not just tolerated, but embraced. That night, in her notebook, she wrote, "Dignity does not bankrupt us. It saves us." As the weeks rolled on, the transformation began to ripple outward. Competitors quietly adopted Horizon's complaint systems. Training companies developed new anti-bias programs modeled on Horizon's reforms. Advocacy groups hailed Selina's leadership as a blueprint for other industries, but Selina resisted celebration. In conversations with Marcus and Danielle, she reminded them, "This isn't the finish line. It's the beginning. Systems don't collapse overnight. They adapt. We must keep moving." Marcus smiled, his eyes warm with pride. "You sound like a leader who understands the long game." In her private solitude, Selina whispered the same words to herself, not as triumph, but as reassurance. The long game. The weight of transformation hadn't lessened, but it had become something she no longer carried alone. Horizon was no longer just an airline. It was a movement. Winter arrived with sharp winds cutting across the city. But inside Horizon's headquarters, the air was alive with something warmer anticipation. 6 months had passed since the scandal first broke. And now the company prepared for an unprecedented event, the grand reopening of its headquarters and the unveiling of the Skyline Justice Fund. A $50 million initiative to support victims of discrimination across the transportation industry. Selina Moore stood in her redesigned office, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling glass, where Edward Kane's dark wood shelves once held trophies of power. The walls now displayed art created by Horizon employees, paintings of planes in bright colors, portraits of crews, abstract designs representing resilience. The circular boardroom table gleamed in the next room, a constant reminder that hierarchy had been replaced with equality. Marcus Hill entered, holding 2 speech drafts. "Big day," he said with a grin, his salt and pepper beard catching the light. Selina exhaled, smoothing her blazer. "Feels bigger than all the others. This isn't just about Horizon anymore. It's about everyone who was silenced, everyone who never had the chance to fight back." Marcus set the drafts on her desk. "Then speak to them. Not to the cameras, not to the shareholders, to the people you're fighting for." When the event began, the headquarters lobby was unrecognizable, no longer reserved for executives. It was filled with employees of every rank, community advocates, and even passengers who had once filed complaints. Reporters jostled at the edges, cameras flashing, but the heart of the gathering was personal, intimate. Selina walked to the stage as the crowd quieted. She carried her ever-present notebook, its worn pages a symbol of persistence. 6 months ago, she began, her voice steady. "I was told to move from a seat I had rightfully earned." That moment wasn't about one flight. It was about a system designed to decide who belongs and who doesn't. Today, we declare something new. Everyone belongs. Applause rippled through the crowd. She continued, "Introducing the Skyline Justice Fund. This fund will provide legal support, career development, and advocacy for those facing discrimination in transportation. Because justice cannot depend on ownership stakes or headlines. It must be available to everyone." Brenda Collins, standing in the front row, felt tears roll down her cheeks. Months earlier, she had been part of the problem. Now, she was part of the solution, working with the Oversight Committee to train staff in recognizing coded bias. She glanced at Selina, silently grateful for the second chance. After Selina's speech, Marcus and Danielle Price joined her on stage. Danielle took the microphone, her tone sharp but hopeful. "What Selina has shown us is that justice isn't abstract, it's structural. It's in the policies we write, the complaints we honor, the promotions we grant. And when we fail to build it, We must repair it." The crowd rose to its feet, applause thunderous. Later that afternoon, in smaller breakout sessions, employees shared their own visions for Horizon's future. Mechanics proposed apprenticeship programs for underrepresented youth. Pilots discussed mentorship initiatives. Attendants brainstormed inclusive service protocols. Selina moved among the groups, listening more than speaking, jotting notes in her binder. Each idea was a seed of the future she hoped to grow. But even amid celebration, reminders of the past lingered. On a television in the corner, news anchors reported on Edward Kane's sentencing hearing. He had pled guilty weeks earlier, and now the judge handed down a 12-year sentence for civil rights conspiracy and fraud. Selina caught fragments of the broadcast Kane entering the courtroom, his once confident stride replaced with a weary shuffle. She turned away, not out of triumph, but because his downfall no longer defined her story. Horizon's rebirth was not about his punishment, but about their collective healing. That evening, as festivities wound down, Selina found herself on the roof of the headquarters, city lights sprawling beneath her. Marcus joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You know," he said, "I've seen leaders who chased power their whole lives and still lost it in the end. But your power doesn't come from position. It comes from conviction. That can't be taken away." Selina smiled faintly. "Conviction feels heavy sometimes." "That's why you share it," Marcus replied. "And you have—" Danielle appeared, holding her phone. "You need to see this." She handed it over. The screen showed social media posts pouring in from passengers and employees across the country, using the hashtag #EveryoneBelongs. Photos of diverse crews, testimonials of fair treatment, stories of hope. The campaign had gone viral, not orchestrated by marketing teams, but born organically from lived experience. Selina's eyes softened. "It's spreading." "Yes," Danielle said, "because people recognize themselves in your fight. They see their own battles reflected in yours." For the first time in months, Selina felt a deep sense of peace. She opened her notebook and wrote slowly, savoring the words. "We began with a seat on a plane. We ended with a seat for everyone at the table." Weeks later, Selina was invited back to Capitol Hill for a final round of testimony. This time, the atmosphere was different. Instead of skepticism, lawmakers listened intently, referencing Horizon's reforms as a model for other industries. One congresswoman asked, "Ms. Moore, what lesson should America take from Horizon's journey?" Selina paused, meeting the eyes of the committee. That discrimination is never just about individuals, it's about systems. And systems can change. But change requires courage, persistence, and the willingness to stand even when you're told to move, especially then. Her words were replayed across networks, etched into op-eds, and quoted in speeches far beyond aviation. Back at Horizon, everyday life began to feel normal again, though a new kind of normal. Employees greeted each other with trust, not suspicion. Passengers boarded flights without fear of coded humiliation. The company wasn't perfect, but it was honest, accountable, and committed to improvement. Selina's story became the subject of documentaries, think pieces, and university lectures. Yet she resisted celebrity. She preferred evenings with Marcus and Danielle, or quiet walks with Brenda discussing the progress of training programs. One night, as she prepared to leave the office, Brenda stopped her. "Selina, you gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve it. How did you know I wouldn't fail you again?" Selina looked at her kindly. "Because I had to believe change was possible. If I couldn't believe that about you, how could I believe it about Horizon?" Brenda nodded, emotion catching in her throat. Later, alone in her office, Selina placed her notebook on the desk. The pages were nearly full, each line a record of the struggle, the victories, the scars, and the hope. She traced her fingers across the cover, whispering, "This was never just my story. It was ours." She closed the notebook for the last time, turning toward the window. The city glowed. Airplanes blinked in the distance. And for the first time since the confrontation on that plane, she felt not just the weight of leadership, but the lightness of possibility. Because tomorrow, she knew, belonged not to those who demanded others move, but to those who believed everyone deserved a place. Life often confronts us with moments when dignity feels negotiable, when it seems easier to step aside than to resist unfairness. But Selena Moore's story reminds us that respect is not a privilege, given it is a birthright. Her refusal to surrender her seat was not about pride. It was about principle. And that principle rippled outward, exposing injustices hidden in plain sight and inspiring change far beyond one airline. For those of us who have walked longer roads, the lesson is clear. We never outgrow the responsibility to demand fairness, not only for ourselves, but for those who come after us. Systems may feel immovable, but they are built by people, and what people build, people can rebuild. The courage to stand firm in small, everyday moments can shape the world in ways we may never fully see. Respect is not something we wait to be offered. It is something we claim. And by doing so, we open the door for others to walk through with dignity and tact. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey. If Selena's story moved you, please take a moment to like this video. Share it with others who believe in dignity and justice. And subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire change. Your support helps keep these voices alive.